I woke up that Tuesday morning expecting nothing more than my usual routine of coffee and checking emails before heading to the warehouse. But instead, I found a 3-foot deep trench carved straight across the shared driveway that connected my property to the main road. The backhoe sat there like a yellow monument to insanity, its bucket still caked with dirt and gravel, positioned right in front of my garage door. I couldn't get my truck out. I couldn't get to work. And standing on the other side of this freshly dug canyon was Patricia Whitmore, arms crossed, wearing her signature purple tracksuit and the most self-satisfied expression I had ever seen on a human face. "Morning, Lucas," she called out cheerfully, as if she hadn't just destroyed our only access route. "I hope you don't mind, but the HOA board decided that this portion of the driveway needed some drainage improvements." I stood there in my work boots and jeans, coffee mug still in hand, trying to process what I was seeing. The trench ran the entire width of the driveway, maybe 15 feet across, cutting right through the asphalt and down into the clay soil beneath. It was impossible to cross without a ladder or some serious jumping skills I definitely didn't possess at 42 years old. "Patricia, what the hell did you do?" I walked to the edge of the trench, looking down at the jagged bottom. "This is our shared driveway. You can't just dig it up without talking to me first." She adjusted her sunglasses even though the sun had barely risen. "Actually, Lucas, if you read the HOA bylaws, you'd know that the board has authority over all common areas and shared spaces. This driveway qualifies as both. We've been planning this drainage project for weeks." Weeks? I felt my blood pressure rising. I've never heard a word about any drainage project, and even if there was one, you can't just trap me on my own property. I need to get to work. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "You should attend the monthly meetings. We discussed it thoroughly in March and April. Not my fault you don't participate in community governance." I had lived in this small development outside of Asheville, North Carolina for 5 years. The place wasn't even really an HOA in the traditional sense. It was just 6 properties that shared a private road leading off Highway 74, with a loose agreement about maintenance and snow removal. Patricia had moved in 2 years ago and immediately declared herself president of an HOA that didn't officially exist. She'd printed up bylaws, started collecting dues that nobody agreed to pay, and sent out violation notices for things like grass being 2 inches too tall or Christmas lights staying up past January 1st. Most of us ignored her. But this was different. This was destruction of property, and it directly affected my ability to leave my own house. "I want this filled in by tonight," I said firmly. "This is completely unacceptable." "Oh, it'll be filled in," Patricia replied sweetly. "In about 3 weeks. That's when the drainage pipe arrives and we can properly complete the installation. Until then, I'm afraid you'll have to make alternative arrangements." 3 weeks. "Patricia, I need to get to work today. Right now, actually. I run a distribution center in Fletcher, and I have a shipment arriving at 8. She shrugged. "Perhaps you should have been more involved in the planning process. The rest of us have made arrangements. The Hendersons are staying with family. The Chens are using vacation time. You had the same notice everyone else did." I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through emails. Nothing. Not a single message about any drainage project or driveway work. I checked the old group text we used for snow removal coordination. Nothing there either. "Patricia, show me this notice you supposedly sent out," she smiled. I posted it on the community bulletin board at the entrance to our development. It's been there for 6 weeks. Again, not my responsibility to personally notify every resident of approved projects. The bulletin board she was referring to was a weathered cork board attached to a post near where our private road met the highway. Nobody looked at it. Ever. It usually just had old garage sale flyers and lost cat posters from 2019. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Okay, let's say you did post something. You still can't just block access to my property. I have an easement agreement. I have legal right to use this driveway. And you still do, Patricia said brightly. You're welcome to walk across at any time. I've put a ladder on both sides for convenience. I looked at the aluminum extension ladder leaning against the far side of the trench. This woman had actually lost her mind. Patricia, I need to drive across it. That's what driveways are for. Well, Lucas, sometimes we all have to make sacrifices for the good of the community. This drainage system will prevent flooding during heavy rains and protect all our properties. It's a necessary improvement. I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere arguing with her. Patricia Whitmore was the kind of person who believed that being loud and stubborn was the same as being right. I'd seen her berate a Girl Scout for setting up a cookie table too close to the road. I'd watched her call the county sheriff because someone parked their boat in their own driveway for more than 48 hours. This was exactly the kind of power trip she lived for. I'm calling my lawyer, I said, turning back toward my house. Feel free, she called after me. The HOA is fully within our legal rights. You'll just be wasting your money. I went inside and immediately started making calls. First to my assistant manager, Mike, letting him know I'd be late and to handle the morning shipment. Then to Tom Rivera, a real estate attorney I'd used when buying the property. He didn't answer, so I left a detailed voicemail. Then I dug through my filing cabinet until I found the easement agreement from when I purchased the house. The document was clear. I had permanent, irrevocable access to the shared driveway for vehicular use. The driveway was to be maintained jointly by all property owners who used it, with costs split equally. Any major modifications required unanimous consent from all parties with easement rights. Patricia had definitely violated the terms. I scanned the document and emailed it to Tom, then sent a follow-up text explaining the situation. While I waited for a response, I went back outside to assess the damage more carefully. The trench was professionally done, I had to admit. Clean edges, uniform depth, obviously excavated by someone who knew how to operate heavy equipment. That backhoe wasn't a rental from Home Depot. This was a serious piece of machinery, probably costing several $100s a day. Where was Patricia getting this kind of money for her imaginary drainage project? I walked around to the other side using Patricia's ladder, which was insulting but necessary. On her side of the trench, I could see tire tracks leading to and from her property. She had clearly had the backhoe operator leave her a way to get in and out, a section of driveway that curved around the construction zone. Of course she did. My phone rang. Tom Rivera. Lucas, I got your email. This is insane. She can't do this. Well, she did it. And she's saying the HOA has authority. What HOA? I reviewed all the property documents when you bought. There's no HOA. There's a road maintenance agreement between the original 6 property owners, but that's not the same thing. Try telling Patricia that. She's been acting like the president of an HOA for 2 years now. Tom was quiet for a moment. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to draft a cease and desist letter right now. This is a clear violation of your easement rights. She needs to restore access immediately or face legal action. Can you send me photos of the trench? I took about 20 photos from different angles, showing the depth, the blocked garage, the ladder, all of it. I sent them to Tom's email. Got them, he said. Jesus, that's a serious excavation. Lucas, she's created a genuine safety hazard too. If someone fell in there, she could be liable for serious injuries. Does she have the site marked? Any warning signs? I looked around. No signs. No caution tape, nothing. Even worse, I'll include that in the letter. She needs to either fill this in or properly barricade it within 24 hours. I'll have this to you by noon. You'll need to serve it to her personally. I can do that. In the meantime, document everything. Every conversation, every expense, everything. If we end up in court, we'll need a clear record. I spent the next hour taking notes about the morning's events, recording times and exact quotes as best I could remember. I also started calling the other property owners on our road to see if anyone else knew about this supposed drainage project. The Hendersons weren't home. The Chens also didn't answer, but I reached Dave Miller, a retired electrician who lived in the fourth house down. Lucas, hey. Yeah, I heard the backhoe yesterday. What's Patricia doing now? You didn't know about a drainage project? Drainage project? No. I mean, she mentioned something about improving water flow a few months ago at one of her fake meetings, but nobody took her seriously. We don't have flooding problems. The road drains fine. Dave, she dug a 3-foot trench across the entire driveway. I can't get my truck out. He laughed, then realized I wasn't joking. Wait, seriously? When? Yesterday, apparently. I found it this morning. That's crazy. She can't just dig up the road. We all own that equally under the maintenance agreement. That's what I told her. She says the HOA approved it. Lucas, there is no HOA. There's 6 property owners and a shared road. That's it. Patricia's been playing pretend for 2 years, but she doesn't have any actual authority. This confirmed what I already knew, but it was good to hear someone else say it. My lawyer's sending a cease and desist. Can I count on you to back me up if this goes to court? Absolutely. Patricia's been a nightmare since she moved in. I'm happy to testify that we never authorized any drainage project. Want me to come take a look? That'd be great. Dave arrived 20 minutes later in his old Ford pickup. He stood at the edge of the trench, shaking his head in disbelief. This is unbelievable. She must have paid thousands for this. Where's she getting that kind of money? I have no idea. She kept talking about HOA funds, but there are no HOA funds. Nobody pays her fake dues. Well, I don't. But maybe the Hendersons or the Chens do. Some people just pay to avoid confrontation. I hadn't considered that possibility. It was true that not everyone dealt with conflict the same way. Maybe Patricia had actually convinced some neighbors to pay her made-up fees. Dave walked around the trench, examining the excavation. You know, this doesn't even make sense from an engineering perspective. If she wanted drainage, you'd put in a culvert or a French drain along the side of the road. You don't dig across it. This is going to cause more water problems than it solves. So what's her actual goal here? He shrugged. Power trip, attention. With Patricia, who knows? Remember when she tried to fine me for painting my house without HOA approval? I remember. What color did you paint it? The exact same color it already was. I was just doing maintenance on the existing paint job. We both laughed, but it wasn't really funny. Patricia had a pattern of overreach and manufactured authority. This was just the most extreme example yet. Tom's cease and desist letter arrived by email at 11:30. It was 2 pages of legal language that boiled down to: fill in the trench immediately, restore vehicular access, and stop pretending to be an HOA. I printed 3 copies, one for Patricia, one for my records, and one for Tom's files. I walked over to Patricia's house, a neat rancher with an overly manicured lawn and decorative flags for every season. Currently, it was flying a summer flag with sunflowers and butterflies. I rang the doorbell. Patricia answered wearing a different tracksuit, this one teal with white stripes. Lucas, what can I do for you? I handed her the letter. "This is from my attorney. You need to restore access to the driveway immediately." She took the letter and barely glanced at it before handing it back. "I'm not accepting service of this document. If your attorney wants to communicate with the HOA, he can do so in writing through our official channels." "Patricia, there are no official channels. There is no HOA, and you have to accept this. I'm serving you personally as the individual who ordered this excavation." "I didn't order anything." "The HOA board voted on and approved this project. I simply implemented the will of the community." "Who's on this board? Name them," she smiled. "That information is confidential and only shared with dues-paying members in good standing." I was getting nowhere. I set the letter on her doormat. "Consider yourself served. You have 24 hours to restore access or face legal action. You do what you need to do, Lucas. I'm confident in the HOA's legal position." I walked back to my house, frustrated but not surprised. Patricia was going to fight this every step of the way. That was fine. I had documentation, I had the law on my side, and I had witnesses. The rest of the day was a wash. I couldn't get to work, so I worked from home as best I could, handling logistics over email and phone. Mike managed the warehouse competently, but there were a dozen small decisions that needed my input, and I spent most of the afternoon on video calls. Around 4 in the afternoon, a county code enforcement truck pulled up. An inspector got out, clipboard in hand, and started examining the trench. I went outside to talk to him. "Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Randolph. I own this property." The inspector, a tired-looking man in his 50s, shook my hand. "Paul Stevens, County Code Enforcement. I got a complaint about unsafe excavation on private property. I filed that complaint this morning." He nodded, making notes. "This is definitely unsafe. No barriers, no signage, no permits that I can find in our system." "Who authorized this work?" "My neighbor, Patricia Whitmore. She claims it's an HOA project, but there is no actual HOA for this development." Paul looked up from his clipboard. "She pulled no permits. Any excavation of this size requires permits, inspection, and proper safety measures. I'm going to have to issue a stop work order and a citation for the safety violations." "The work's already stopped. She's not planning to do anything more for 3 weeks, apparently." "Then she needs to make it safe in the interim. Barricades, warning signs, lighting if it's going to be open after dark. I'll give her 48 hours to comply or the fines start adding up." He spent another 20 minutes documenting the site, taking his own photos and measurements. Then he went to Patricia's house. I watched from my window as she answered the door, argued for several minutes, and finally took the paperwork he handed her. Her face was red even from a distance. After Paul left, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello. Is this Lucas Randolph?" A woman's voice, professional but strained. "Yes." "This is Margaret Chen. Patricia Whitmore just called me screaming about how you're trying to sabotage HOA projects. What on earth is happening?" I explained the entire situation to Margaret, who listened in growing horror. "She told us the driveway work was routine maintenance," Margaret said. "She sent an email saying it would only be closed for 1 day and that she'd coordinated with everyone. We're visiting my sister in Charlotte this week, so we didn't think much of it." "Do you have that email?" "Can you forward it to me?" "Of course." "Lucas, we never authorized a 3-week construction project, and we certainly never agreed to pay for it. She told us it was $100 per household for our share of the maintenance costs." "Margaret, there is no HOA. You know that, right?" She was quiet for a moment. "I thought it was informal, like a neighborhood association. We're new to the area. We moved here last fall. It's not even informal, it doesn't exist. Patricia made it up." The only real agreement we have is the road maintenance contract that splits snow removal and pothole repairs between the 6 property owners. Oh my God, we've been paying her $50 a month for HOA dues since December. I did the quick math. That was $350 from the Chens alone. If the Hendersons were paying too, Patricia could have accumulated several $1,000s in fraudulent fees. Margaret, you should stop paying immediately, and you might want to consider asking for a refund. I'm forwarding you this email right now. And Lucas, if you need us to testify or provide statements, we absolutely will. This is fraud. The email from Patricia arrived in my inbox a minute later. It was dated 8 days ago and claimed that routine driveway maintenance would occur on Monday with minimal disruption to access. No mention of a trench, no mention of 3 weeks, nothing about drainage systems. It was deliberately misleading at best. I forwarded it to Tom with a note. Patricia told the Chens this was 1-day routine maintenance. They paid $100 toward costs. Also been paying $50/month in fake HOA dues since December. Tom called me immediately. Lucas, this might be fraud. Actual criminal fraud. If she's collecting money under false pretenses, that's a legal issue beyond just the civil easement violation. What should I do? Document everything. Get statements from the Chens and anyone else who's paid her. I want to know exactly how much money she's collected and what she claimed it was for. In the meantime, I'm filing an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order. If we can get a judge to review this tomorrow, we might be able to force her to restore access immediately. How fast can that happen? If we're lucky, we could have a hearing by end of day Thursday. I'll file first thing tomorrow morning. Make sure you're available to attend. After I hung up with Tom, I called Margaret back and asked her to document every payment she'd made to Patricia, including dates and what Patricia claimed the money was for. She agreed and said she'd have it to me by morning. I tried calling the Hendersons again. This time, Robert Henderson answered. Lucas, hey. We're at our daughter's place in Raleigh. What's going on? I explained for the 3rd time that day. Robert's reaction was even stronger than Margaret's. She dug a what? Across the whole driveway. A 3-foot trench I can't get out. Lucas, we never agreed to any drainage project. She told us there was going to be some crack sealing and minor repairs. We gave her $200 for our share of materials. $200. She told you it would cost $200 to seal some cracks. She said it was specialized sealant and professional application. Look, we're not idiots, but Susan has health issues and we don't need the stress of fighting with neighbors. It was easier to just pay and avoid drama. I understood. Not everyone wanted to spend their retirement battling a self-appointed HOA president. But Patricia had taken advantage of that, collecting money for fake projects and fake dues. Robert, my attorney thinks this might be fraud. Would you be willing to provide a statement about what Patricia told you and what you paid? Absolutely. This has gone way too far. Susan is already upset about it. We'll help however we can. By evening, I had statements from the Chens and the Hendersons, plus documentation of over $1,000 in fraudulent collections. Dave Miller confirmed he'd never paid Patricia anything and had repeatedly told her he didn't recognize her authority. The 6th property on our road belonged to an investment company that rented it out as a vacation property. I found their contact information and left a message, but I wasn't expecting much help from an absentee landlord. That night, I barely slept. The trench was still there in the morning, a gaping wound across the driveway. Patricia had put out some orange traffic cones around it, probably in response to the code enforcement citation. But that was it. No barricades, no real safety measures. Tom filed his emergency motion at 9 in the morning on Wednesday. By noon, we had a hearing scheduled for 3 o'clock that afternoon in front of Judge Linda Morrison at the Buncombe County Courthouse. I put on a suit, printed out all my documentation, and drove the long way around the development. Since I couldn't use our shared driveway, I had to exit through my backyard, which technically connected to an old logging road that eventually met Highway 74 about 2 miles down. It took me 40 minutes to get to the courthouse, a trip that should have been 15. Tom met me outside the courtroom. Okay, here's what's going to happen. We're asking the judge for a temporary restraining order requiring Patricia to restore access immediately. We're also going to present evidence of the fraudulent fee collection. Judge Morrison is fair, but she doesn't like people wasting her time, so we need to be clear and concise. Got it. Patricia arrived with her own attorney, a young guy in an expensive suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. They sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, Patricia wearing what I assumed was her version of business attire, a purple pantsuit with an American flag pin. Judge Morrison entered and we all stood. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. All right, let's make this quick. I've reviewed the motion. Mr. Rivera, you're claiming that Miss Whitmore has illegally blocked your client's access to a shared driveway. Tom stood. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Randolph has an easement agreement guaranteeing vehicular access to the driveway. Miss Whitmore excavated a 3-foot trench across the driveway without consent, without permits, and without any legal authority. Miss Whitmore, you're represented by Mr. Castellano, Patricia's attorney stood. Yes, Your Honor. James Castellano for the defendant. Your Honor, Miss Whitmore was acting in her capacity as president of the Homeowners Association. The project was properly voted on and approved by the HOA board. Judge Morrison looked at him over her glasses. Is there a registered HOA for this development? Castellano hesitated. It's an informal association, Your Honor, but it has been operating for several years with the consent of the residents. Mr. Rivera, Tom stood again. Your Honor, there is no HOA, formal or otherwise. There are 6 property owners who share a private road under a maintenance agreement from 1987. Miss Whitmore moved to the development 2 years ago and unilaterally declared herself president of an organization that does not exist. She has no legal authority to modify the shared driveway, and she certainly has no authority to block access. Judge Morrison looked at the documents in front of her. I have photos here of this alleged trench. This is a significant excavation. Mr. Castellano, where are the permits for this work? Your Honor, Miss Whitmore believed that as an internal HOA matter, permits were not required. That's incorrect. Any excavation of this size requires county permits regardless of whether it's on private or public property. I also have a report from County Code Enforcement citing safety violations. Miss Whitmore, stand up please. Patricia stood, her confidence finally wavering slightly. Did you excavate this trench? I hired a contractor to do the work, yes, Your Honor. But it was approved by the HOA board and is part of a necessary drainage improvement project. Did you obtain consent from all property owners who use this driveway? The HOA board represents the property owners, Your Honor. That's not what I asked. Did you personally obtain consent from Mr. Randolph and the other property owners? Patricia shifted her weight. Mr. Randolph was given notice through the community bulletin board. He chose not to respond. Judge Morrison looked at Tom. What does the easement agreement say about modifications? It requires unanimous consent from all parties with easement rights, Your Honor. We have the original agreement here. signed by all 6 property owners in 1987 when the development was created. Does Miss Whitmore's signature appear on this agreement? No, Your Honor. She purchased her property in 2024. The easement runs with the land and binds all subsequent owners. Judge Morrison turned back to Patricia. Miss Whitmore, you do understand that when you purchased your property, you agreed to the terms of the existing easement. Yes, Your Honor, but the HOA has the authority to make necessary improvements for the benefit of all residents. What HOA? Show me documentation of this HOA. Corporate filings, bylaws, anything registered with the county. Castellano stood. Your Honor, as I mentioned, it's an informal association. The bylaws are internal documents. So it's not registered with the county, it has no legal status, and it exists only because Miss Whitmore says it does. Other residents have participated in HOA activities, Your Honor. Tom interjected. Your Honor, we have statements from 3 of the 6 property owners explicitly stating they do not recognize any HOA and never authorized this excavation. A 4th property owner is an absentee landlord who was never contacted. That leaves only Miss Whitmore and potentially 1 other property who remained silent. Judge Morrison had clearly heard enough. Here's what's going to happen. I'm issuing a temporary restraining order requiring Miss Whitmore to restore full vehicular access to the shared driveway within 72 hours. That means filling in the trench or installing a temporary bridge sufficient to support vehicle traffic. If access is not restored within that time frame, Miss Whitmore will be fined $1,000 per day until compliance is achieved. Additionally, no further work may be done on this supposed drainage project without written consent from all easement holders and proper county permits. Do you understand, Miss Whitmore? Patricia's face was bright red. Your Honor, the drainage project is for the safety and benefit of everyone. We can't just fill it back in without completing the work. You should have thought of that before you started unauthorized construction. You have 3 options: fill it in, build a temporary bridge, or pay substantial fines. Those are your choices. This hearing is adjourned. We left the courtroom and Patricia immediately started arguing with Castellano in the hallway. I could hear her voice rising as Tom and I walked away. That went well, Tom said. She has until Saturday to restore access or the fines kick in. My guess is she'll try to do the minimum possible. What's the minimum? Probably a temporary bridge. Some thick plywood over steel supports. It won't be pretty, but it'll be drivable. And the fraud angle, Tom lowered his voice. That's criminal. I'm not a criminal attorney, but based on the evidence you've gathered, Patricia has been collecting money under false pretenses. You need to file a police report. The DA's office will decide whether to prosecute. I hadn't really wanted to involve the police, but Tom was right. Patricia had collected over $1,000 from neighbors by lying about HOA fees and project costs. That was fraud by any definition. On Thursday morning, I went to the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office and filed a formal complaint. The deputy who took my report was professional but skeptical. So she's been collecting money for a fake HOA? Yes. She told neighbors she was the president of a homeowners association and collected monthly dues and special assessments for projects. But there is no HOA. It doesn't exist. How much money are we talking about? At least $1,000 that I can document, possibly more if there are other payments I don't know about. The deputy took notes and said they'd forward the complaint to the fraud division for investigation. I left feeling like I'd done what I could, but unsure whether anything would actually come of it. Back home, I found Patricia standing by the trench with a surveyor. They were having an animated discussion, the surveyor shaking his head repeatedly while Patricia gestured emphatically. I walked over. "What's going on?" The surveyor, a gray-haired man with a weathered face, looked relieved to see me. "Are you Lucas Randolph?" "I am." "Tom Harrison, Harrison Surveying. Miss Whitmore hired me to verify the property lines. She seems to think the driveway is entirely on her property." I almost laughed. "It's a shared driveway with a recorded easement. The property line runs down the middle." Patricia jumped in. "I have a right to know exactly where my property begins and ends, and if the driveway is on my land, then I have authority over it." Tom Harrison looked uncomfortable. "Madam, even if the physical driveway surface is on your property, the easement gives the other owners legal right to use it. That doesn't change regardless of where the property line is." "So survey it and tell me exactly where the line is," Patricia insisted. "I can do that, but it's going to cost you $800 and it won't change your legal situation. The easement is already recorded and valid." I could see Patricia's frustration mounting. She'd clearly hoped that somehow the survey would prove she had the right to do whatever she wanted with the driveway. The surveyor was telling her that wasn't how easements worked. "Do the survey," she said firmly. "I want documentation." Tom Harrison shrugged and got to work. I went back to my house, shaking my head. Patricia was spending thousands of dollars trying to justify her trench instead of just filling it in like the judge ordered. Friday afternoon, I got a call from Detective Sarah Brandt with the Sheriff's Office Fraud Division. "Mr. Randolph, I've been assigned to investigate your complaint regarding Patricia Whitmore. Can you meet me at my office on Monday to go over the evidence?" "Absolutely." "What time?" 10 o'clock work for you? I'll be there. Bring all the documentation you have. Bank records, emails, statements from the neighbors who paid her. The more detailed, the better. I spent the weekend organizing everything into a clear timeline. Patricia moves in April 2024. She declares herself HOA president May 2024. She starts collecting dues from the Chens December 2024. She collects special assessments from the Hendersons February 2025. She begins the unauthorized excavation May 2026. Every event documented, every dollar accounted for. Saturday came and went with no movement from Patricia. The trench remained open, the orange cones the only concession to safety. Sunday at noon, Tom called. "Lucas, have you seen any construction activity at the site?" "Nothing. The trench is still there." The deadline was today at 3 o'clock. If she doesn't restore access by then, the fines start. That's $1,000 a day. "I'll file the necessary paperwork with the court on Monday morning." At 3:05, I went outside and took time-stamped photos of the unchanged trench. No bridge, no fill, no access. Patricia was officially in violation of the court order. Monday morning, I met with Detective Brandt. She was a sharp woman in her 40s who took detailed notes as I walked through the evidence. "This is pretty clear-cut," she said after reviewing everything. She established a fake organization, collected money under false pretenses, and used that money for unauthorized construction. The question is whether we can prove intent to defraud, or if she genuinely believed she had authority. Does it matter? She lied to people and took their money. For criminal charges, intent matters. If she actually thought she was president of a real HOA, that might be a defense. But given that she never registered the organization, never filed any corporate paperwork, and deliberately misled people about the scope of the driveway project, I think we can establish intent. What happens next? I'll interview the other victims, the Chens and the Hendersons. I'll also subpoena Patricia's bank records to see where this money went. If she spent HOA funds on personal expenses, that strengthens the fraud case. Give me a couple weeks to build this. I left feeling cautiously optimistic. The criminal investigation was moving forward, and Tom had filed for contempt of court based on Patricia's failure to restore access. When I got home, I found a construction crew installing a temporary bridge over the trench. The foreman told me Patricia had hired them Sunday night, but they couldn't get materials until Monday morning. The bridge was essentially a steel frame with industrial-grade plywood, rated to support vehicles up to 2 tons. "It's safe," the foreman assured me. "Not pretty, but safe. You can drive over it." They finished around 4 o'clock. I tested it with my truck, driving slowly across. The bridge held fine, though it creaked and bounced more than I liked. Still, I could finally access my driveway again after 6 days of being trapped. Tom filed an objection to the late compliance, arguing that Patricia should still face fines for the 3 days she was in violation. The judge agreed to 1 day's fine, $1,000, as a penalty for the delay. Patricia's response was to file a countersuit claiming I had harassed her and interfered with legitimate HOA business. It was a nuisance suit, obviously designed to create mutual legal expenses and pressure me to drop my claims. Tom advised me to ignore it. It has no merit. Any judge who reads the facts will dismiss it immediately. She's just lashing out. May turned into June. The temporary bridge remained in place, the trench still gaping beneath it. Patricia made no moves to complete her supposed drainage project or fill in the excavation. The county had issued multiple citations for permit violations, but she ignored those too. Detective Brandt called in mid-June with an update. "Mr. Randolph, I've completed my investigation." Patricia Whitmore collected approximately $2,300 in fake HOA fees and assessments between December 2024 and May 2026. She spent most of it on the excavation and her attorney fees, but she also used HOA funds to purchase a new laptop and pay for a vacation to Florida, claiming both were HOA expenses. "So you have enough for charges?" "Yes. I'm presenting the case to the DA this week. My recommendation is multiple counts of theft by deception and 1 count of fraud. Given the amounts involved, these would be misdemeanors, but she could face up to a year in jail and be required to make full restitution." "What about the driveway situation?" "That's still a civil matter." "But if she's convicted of fraud, it might impact her credibility in any civil trial." The DA's office moved faster than I expected. On June 22nd, Patricia Whitmore was formally charged with 3 counts of theft by deception and 1 count of fraud. She was arrested at her home, processed, and released on her own recognizance with a court date set for August. The arrest made the local news. "Local woman charged with HOA fraud," read the headline in the Asheville Citizen-Times. The article detailed how Patricia had created a fake homeowners association and collected thousands in bogus fees. It quoted Detective Brandt and included comments from Margaret Chen about how she'd been deceived. I felt a little bad for Patricia when I saw her mugshot, looking tired and defeated in her orange jumpsuit. But then, I remembered 6 days of being trapped on my own property and the thousands of dollars in legal fees I'd accumulated fighting her manufactured authority. Tom filed a summary judgment motion in our civil case, arguing that there were no genuine disputes of material fact. Patricia had violated the easement agreement. The court had ordered her to restore access, and she should be required to properly fill in the trench and pay damages. The hearing was scheduled for July 15th. Patricia's attorney had withdrawn after her arrest, citing ethical concerns about continuing representation. She showed up to court representing herself, which was a terrible decision. Judge Morrison reviewed the facts quickly. "Miss Whitmore, You excavated a trench across a shared driveway without consent, without permits, and in violation of an easement agreement. You were ordered to restore access, which you did only partially and only after missing the court's deadline. You've been charged criminally with fraud related to the supposed HOA that authorized this project. Do you have any legal basis to argue that your actions were appropriate? Patricia stood. Your Honor, I was acting in what I believed to be the best interests of the community. We needed drainage improvements and nobody else was willing to take charge. That's not a legal argument, Miss Whitmore. The law requires consent for modifications to shared property. You didn't obtain that consent. Judgment for the plaintiff. Miss Whitmore, you are ordered to properly fill in the trench and restore the driveway to its original condition within 30 days. You will also pay Mr. Randolph's legal fees, which the court sets at $8,500, and compensate him for lost wages during the period he was unable to access his property. Mr. Randolph, how many days were you unable to work? I stood. 6 days, Your Honor. My daily rate is $280. Miss Whitmore will pay an additional $1,680 in lost wages. Total damages of $10,180, plus the cost of restoring the driveway. Do you have anything to say, Miss Whitmore? Patricia looked like she might cry. I don't have that kind of money, Your Honor. Then you shouldn't have dug up your neighbor's driveway. You have 30 days for the restoration work and 90 days to begin payment on the damages. I'm ordering a payment plan of $500 per month until the full amount is satisfied. If you default, Mr. Randolph can pursue further collection actions. This case is closed. I left the courthouse feeling vindicated but not particularly happy. Patricia had put us all through months of stress and expense over her delusions of authority. Now she faced criminal charges, substantial debt, and the humiliation of being publicly exposed as a fraud. The criminal case went to trial in late August. I attended as a witness, testifying about the fake HOA and the unauthorized excavation. Margaret and Robert Henderson also testified about the money they'd paid and the lies Patricia had told them. Patricia's public defender tried to argue that she genuinely believed she had authority as HOA president, that it was all a misunderstanding rather than intentional fraud. But the evidence was overwhelming. The unregistered organization, the personal expenses paid from HOA funds, the deliberate misrepresentations about the scope of the driveway work, it all pointed to someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The jury convicted her on all counts after 3 hours of deliberation. Sentencing was set for October. In the meantime, Patricia finally hired a contractor to fill in the trench. The work was done hastily and poorly, with cold patch asphalt that would probably need to be redone within a year. But it restored the driveway to something resembling its original condition. The temporary bridge was removed, and I could drive normally again. Patricia made her first payment of $500 in September, a money order delivered silently to my mailbox with no note or apology. I deposited it without comment. The sentencing hearing was brief. Judge Arthur Reynolds, who'd presided over the criminal trial, sentenced Patricia to 6 months in jail, suspended to 18 months probation, and ordered full restitution of $2,300 to the victims of her fraud. She was also required to perform 100 hours of community service and attend a financial ethics course. Miss Whitmore, Judge Reynolds said, you violated the trust of your neighbors and abused a position of authority that you never actually held. You're fortunate that nobody was seriously injured by your reckless excavation work. If you violate the terms of this probation, you will serve the full jail sentence. Do you understand? Patricia, looking small and defeated, nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." I never spoke to Patricia again after that. She made her monthly payments like clockwork, probably terrified of violating probation. The check or money order would appear in my mailbox on the first of each month, and I'd deposit it and update my records. She stopped attending neighborhood events, stopped trying to enforce imaginary rules, stopped pretending to be anything other than another property owner on a shared road. Her house went up for sale in December, and she moved out in February of the following year. The new owners were a young couple with a baby. They introduced themselves politely, asked about the snow removal schedule, and showed no interest in forming or leading any kind of association. They were perfect neighbors. Dave Miller and I eventually did form an actual, informal group to handle road maintenance. We collected voluntary contributions for snow removal and pothole repairs, kept clear records, and made decisions by consensus. It worked fine without bylaws or precedents or manufactured authority. The whole experience taught me that some people are so desperate for control and importance that they'll create entire fictional structures to justify their behavior. Patricia wasn't evil, just deeply insecure and willing to lie to feel powerful. The trench was never about drainage. It was about proving she could make decisions that affected other people's lives. I still drive over the spot where the trench was every day. The cold patch asphalt has mostly held up, though it's starting to crack and will need proper repair eventually. When that happens, we'll all discuss it, get estimates, split the cost fairly, and hire a contractor. No trenches, no drama, no fake HOA meetings, just neighbors working together the way it should have been all along. The final payment from Patricia arrived in mail on a Tuesday in October, nearly 2 years after the trench first appeared. It was a money order for $500, exactly like all the others. I deposited it and sent an email to Tom letting him know the debt was satisfied. "Congratulations," he wrote back. "Most legal battles don't have such a clean resolution. You did everything right, documented thoroughly, didn't escalate unnecessarily, and let the system work." I appreciated that, though I'd have preferred never to need legal representation against a neighbor in the first place. The whole situation had cost me time, money, and peace of mind. But it also taught me the importance of standing up for your rights, even when dealing with someone who seems irrationally committed to being wrong. Margaret Chen brought over a pie the day the final payment cleared. "We wanted to thank you," she said. "If you hadn't fought this, Patricia would probably still be collecting fake dues and running the neighborhood like her personal fiefdom." "I just wanted to get to work," I said, but I appreciated the gesture. Robert Henderson stopped by the following week with a bottle of bourbon. "For your trouble," he said. "Susan and I are grateful you handled this. We're too old for legal battles." Dave Miller didn't bring gifts, but he did say something I appreciated even more. "You did good, Lucas. Some people just need to be stopped." He was right. Patricia needed to be stopped, and the law provided a mechanism for doing that. The easement agreement, the court system, the criminal fraud statutes, all of it existed for exactly this kind of situation. I'd simply used the tools available to protect my property rights and hold someone accountable for their illegal actions. Looking back on the whole ordeal, the most surreal part was how easily it could have been avoided. If Patricia had just talked to me before digging the trench, if she'd sought actual consensus instead of manufactured authority, if she'd been honest about her plans and costs, we probably could have worked something out. Maybe the drainage project had some merit. Maybe we could have done it properly, with permits and shared costs and a real plan. But Patricia didn't want collaboration. She wanted control. And when you prioritize control over cooperation, Eventually, you dig a trench that destroys your relationships and your credibility. I heard through Dave that Patricia moved to somewhere in Tennessee, a condo development with an actual HOA. Maybe that's where she belonged all along, in a place with real rules and real authority structures. Or maybe she learned her lesson and decided to just be a regular resident without delusions of power. I hoped for the latter, but suspected the former. The shared driveway still connects 6 properties to Highway 74. We still maintain it collectively, still split the costs, still make decisions together. The only difference is that now everyone knows what happens when someone tries to take unilateral action: courts, lawyers, fines, and criminal charges. It's not a story I enjoy telling, but it's one I tell honestly when people ask why I'm so particular about getting everything in writing and following proper procedures. The law matters. Agreements matter. Consent matters. And if someone digs a trench across your driveway without permission, you have every right to make them fill it back in and pay for the damage. That's what easements are for.